Thanks again for joining us on the InScope podcast. This is John Scott. I'm your fantastic host, one of the co-founders over at ScopeStack. Today, I'm excited to have someone in studio with me, Scott Millwood. Scott's a mentor, a fellow entrepreneur here. However, he's also had an extremely extensive background in IT services with DataStream and Customer Effective and some other Microsoft business. And so, thanks for joining us, man.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. I think the first time we met was I was in a group trying to pitch a group of mentors and things like that about, the problem we're solving with ScopeStack. And there was one person in the room that knew exactly what we were talking about, and it was you. And so
I have lived the scoping problems.
Yeah. And so it's always encouraging, right? When you talk to someone that knows the pain of selling services, dealing with pre-sales and dealing with sales and just all the dynamics that go into that. So I thought it'd be great just to have you on here and kind of share some of your knowledge with our billion podcast subscribers.
All right. Happy to share my bit of knowledge. Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for joining us. I thought a good place to start is just, you have always been more on the selling side, right? You're building the relationships, you're kind of talking about the outcomes. And so, in the past, a lot of our guests have been about, the tactical things around scoping and pricing. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about the perspective of someone on the sales side and what are the implications? How do you sell services, right? Because you've clearly been effective at doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Happy to share a few insights on that. Yeah, I've always spent my career on sales and marketing and as a leader, which I think was also the reason that I ended up in the CRM business with Customer Effective, was automating sales forces and helping to get that information out of their heads in front of other people. Mm-hmm. But we also always saw the value of connecting that early stage information that you gather in the sales process with the scoping process so that you didn't lose anything in the gap, right? Try to eliminate the gap between the services guy and the sales guy. They should be seen as one.
Yeah. The way I think about it is sales, pre-sales, post-sales, right? And those can't be these silos of information.
Right.
That can't be.
Right.
And so what we try to do with ScopeStack, right, and not shameless plug, is really help bridge that gap so you're not missing that information from sales and all the way through to delivery. Because the worst thing you can do is delivery engineer has their very first conversation with the client. You've won the project, you're about to deliver it, and they have zero perspective.
Yeah, they're asking the same questions again, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, a lot of that, continuity between your first, business development rep that's having the conversation better be gathering up that information so that it can be shared with the outside rep, and then with the pre-sales person, and then with the sales engineer, and then with the consultant, right? There's a whole chain there.
Yep.
And you've got to share that information along the way, because part of what you're doing in selling and delivering services is you're establishing trust from the get-go. Right. And that, to me, that concept of trust from a selling standpoint is from the first conversation. You're building that trusted relationship. If you're asking questions multiple times, you look dumb, one, but your trust level goes down, right?
Yeah.
You just
it's like, this team is not talking to each other.
They're not talking to each other, right? Yeah. So you have no trust in the delivery company, services company isn't able to share that information inside. How good are they going to be during their services delivery project?
Right.
Yeah.
So where does it start? You mentioned the BDR, building trust. I know the importance of a pre-sales engineer building trust with other engineers within that organization. Does it start with that BDR?
It starts with your marketing materials right away. It's your website, right? The whole thing should be geared, in my mind, around creating this blanket of trust that wraps around your entire process. So being very transparent about your delivery process, defining your delivery process on your website so that it's reiterated. When your BDR has that first conversation, they're bringing up your methodology. When your sales guy's out there, he's bringing up methodology. When your pre-sales people are there, they're talking about that. You're just reiterating that same message over and over. So, having that kind of, we used to use a thing called 4D, or define, design, develop, deploy. Mm-hmm. Very easy, kind of branded methodology. We would put some descriptors around those big chunks, and then everybody could remember 4D. It just, it rolls off the tongue. We put it in all our materials, and then you saw it all the way through to the very end of your phase one project. You're seeing the 4Ds the whole way, the whole way through.
Well, I mean, easier said than done, right? Like you have to, in order to share that with clients on a marketing side, even you have to have it established.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I think that's like a whole podcast in itself around.
It is entirely. And it's the basis of your product, right? Is how do we have that repeatable, believable, trusted methodology that you just cranking that every single time. Everybody's singing from the same song sheet, so to speak.
Yeah. Completely agree. So, you and I talked about, so getting back to that trust piece, like the importance of references, case studies, and again, this is still more or less on the sales side, but, if we talk about references, like who do you go to if you're a services organization? Like, is it your biggest client? Is it your smallest client? Is it?
Yeah. I mean, our goal, and I think back to, Customer Effective, we were early stage selling V1 Microsoft CRM, right? And so the product might be a little shaky, but our delivery process was pretty solid. And our goal on the very first customer was, this has to be a lighthouse reference. And so we did everything we could to build up that first reference, because we used that first reference to go build the rest of them.
Right.
So our goal on every single project, stated at the get-go with the decision makers, was our objective is to have you as a reference. We want you referenceable. We want a case study. We want a video of you. We want to put you on stage and shine a spotlight on your success with the results that you've gotten, right? And so that's, again, we're making a commitment to them.
Yeah.
And selfishly, references sell services projects. People want to see that you've done it before, that it's just like me, and here's a senior level executive that trusted you and says, yes, these guys delivered on the results. So you're selfishly sort of short-circuiting your selling process by walking in at the very first meeting with 6 reference stories that you're popping out on the table, and using those stories throughout your description of your delivery process to say, XYZ company did it just like this. When we ran into this integration issue with ABC company, here's how we addressed it.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause I tell people all the time, if you can build a scalable scoping pricing process, it instills confidence from the client, because pretend like you've done it before. It shouldn't be like you're reinventing the wheel every time. And so if you go into a client and you say, we be aware of that. I know you're talking to Microsoft or Cisco or whoever, be aware that that piece may not work as you think it's going to work. Right. Or if it doesn't work like that, we have a workaround because we've done it before. We ran into that. And so
absolutely.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah. The trusted part of that, again, back to that concept of trust. One of the things we would do a lot is use reference material. So we would take the story of this success, but we would then take the reference materials that we produced from that project, and literally, is a little bit corny, but it just works, is we would make all of that project material into a 3-ring binder and walk it in as a book and put it in front of somebody, blank out the customer name.
Yeah.
But it was pretty obvious.
If you put a 3-ring binder in front of me, I would do whatever it said. Probably. Instant credibility.
A checklist, right? Sign here.
Instant credibility. If you have a trapper.
You slide that, 150 pages of project material across the table. It's like, okay, well, these guys they've been there and done that.
I have 10 more in my trunk.
Got 10 more in the trunk. What else do you need to see? Yeah. Later on, that evolved to us literally demoing our project delivery on our website, and we would. During our discussions with a prospect, we would show them our project system and walk them through an example project and example reports so that we could say, essentially, imagine yourself here.
Yeah.
Here's how you access the portal. Here's how you're going to get these reports sent to you. Here's how we manage our weekly update meetings. And it all just looked like you've been there and done that.
Yeah, no, Trust. I mean, that kind of transparency, I think, would That's awesome. I mean, that's a great example of, because I've been a part of organizations where you bring them into a lab, right?
Yep.
Or it's, pilot or proof of concept, sort of thing. But you don't do all the work, but you do some of the work up front as an investment into that deal.
Right.
However, I would imagine, so like, again, kind of back to the trust thing, when you first started having conversations with clients, you're talking to maybe a junior person or maybe a manager or director,
right.
building that trust there.
Right.
Is that the right person in your experience?
No.
To build a trust.
No.
It's one person.
It's one person in the chain,
Yeah.
the sort of the concept of the pain chain, right? Where does it hurt the most?
Yeah.
It usually hurts the most at the top. And so you're trying to associate your solution to the problem that they have and make sure that you understand how it affects everybody up the chain to the ultimate decision maker. We used to joke a lot that, you can get stuck with Seymour at the first meeting, and Seymour just, I want to show me more, see more demos, see more software, see more services scope, whatever it may be. And it's not a bad person to be involved with, but you have to ask the hard questions of what's their role, who's the ultimate decision maker, who writes the check, and those may be different people.
Right.
But the concept there is really make sure you're dealing with power, or you're negotiating to get to power before you invest a lot of time, energy, and effort into any sort of scoping exercise, right? I mean,
sure,
you could scope all day long, and I've seen this happen where, salesperson comes back from a great meeting with Seymour with these big happy years. It's like, I got a sale. It's ready to happen. They're going to buy next week. We just got to get John out there to write a 150-page scope document, and we're going to win.
Yeah.
And,
John doesn't want to do that, by
John does not. That's right. He's busy. He's busy. And the mistake that a younger and more, less mature organization can make is to quickly jump on that and go out and burn up a lot of time and energy writing scope documents for the wrong person, and potentially, and this is a horrible mistake, emailing over an elaborate scope document and work breakdown structure, and it goes into Seymour's inbox, and it goes into the black hole of death.
Yeah, no one else sees it.
Nobody else sees it. It hasn't been presented. It hasn't been discussed, and you miss that prime opportunity to gain access to power first by negotiating with Seymour that, hey, we will write these documents and build this project plan for you, but we have to have access to power, and we need to be able to present our scoping back to power. And so, that negotiation is important. You can't ignore Seymour. You got to figure out what his win is, but you also don't want to waste time and effort spending unnecessary cycles there.
And there's a right time for a scope. There's a right time for a service brief. There's a right time for a proposal to qualify.
Yeah, most
right?
definitely.
A scope is not the thing you use to qualify business.
Right.
That is you mentioned it. They're some of the most valuable resources, highest paid resources in the organization are the people writing those scopes.
Right.
Most of the time.
Absolutely.
And so
absolutely.
Don't invite John to that meeting just because you have happy years and all that. And so,
well, I mean, in an odd sort of way, and we always use the analogy of building houses because building projects, building houses, there's a very, very good comparable there.
Yeah.
You are not going to ask an architect to create a set of blueprints if you haven't already had the discussion with a general contractor about the cost of the house, right? You're going to have that rough cut capacity budget discussion to say with a contractor, it's X $100 per square foot, and we're thinking about X square feet. And you do that rough math and go, you're either in or out. And now you start to fine tune it and say, okay, let's engage the architect who's going to go through the same sort of exercise of asking me what I want, what I need, how am I going to use the space, et cetera, et cetera. And then they're going to create your blueprint, which is going to be an expensive effort. And it is your finalized plan that you are going to then give to the GC. So, all that working your way down the funnel is appropriate to think about when you're selling services.
Yeah. And I think a really good point you made there, among many, is, you don't just email over the scope of work.
Right. Right.
You know, it is a presentation. You're selling words at that point.
Absolutely.
You know, and you're selling outcomes.
Right.
It is very hard for someone that's never seen one of your statements of work potentially. If this is a new client, I don't know what this means. I'm going to go look at the price. I might tell my boss about it, or I might just wait, you know, for the right time.
Absolutely.
But in your experience, like, you know, you mentioned the architect and the GC, you know, I think about the GC as like the delivery engineer.
Yeah.
Is that person, are they involved in those conversations ever in your experience, or is it really pre-sales, sales doing the majority of the work?
Yeah. I mean, you know, one of the unique things that I think we did, you know, back to that concept of connecting the selling effort with the delivery effort is we had a role of a consulting director that would work with our account exec, the salesperson.
Okay.
And they owned the customer delivery and success together.
Gotcha.
So our consulting director was accountable for the scoping. Now they might, you know, delegate that out, but they ultimately owned the scope itself, the scope document, and the delivery to the end. So there was no this guy scoped it and threw it over the wall, and then this guy delivers it. Where we saw some of that early days, where, you know, the person who got the scoping document would point back to, oh, this is wrong, that's not right, and so all of a sudden you've got credibility gap. If you have the same person that's creating it, that's delivering it, they own it from end to end.
Yeah, you know, I'm a big fan of, you know, as a pre-sales engineer, building relationships with those delivery engineers, because again, they've been there, they've done that,
Right.
they know the caveats,
Absolutely.
the things that you need to address and make sure you're specific about in your statement of work as you're scoping it.
Yep.
And so, again, a big fan of that relationship. You know, sales and pre-sales is really important, but pre-sales and post-sales delivery team is just as important in my mind.
Just as important, absolutely.
Because they can, you know, have them kind of back channel, like be a part of the scoping process, ask them questions. And because to your point, when they get that document, they're not gonna be like, hey, John, what did you scope this time? You know, and because I've been a part of a lot of organizations like that. You know, there's so much going on. You're trying to create all this speed, but because there's a lack of consistency in what's being transitioned from sales to pre-sales and pre-sales to post-sales, it just gets real kludgy real fast.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and us, you know, as we were selling projects, and which really the first project is the beginning of a customer relationship that would last for, you know, 80% of our revenue was recurring back to customer base. So it was the first project was just the opening volley in a long relationship. We introduced the consulting director pretty early in the sales process, and that, you know, was a transparency thing for the senior level people at the prospect to get a taste of who owns the delivery, who is ultimately accountable. And we made a big deal versus our competitors of introducing that person early to ensure to the prospect that they knew who they were dealing with and that we weren't going to change horses after the fact. You know, a lot of organizations like
it's a bait and switch.
They take their A team, and then the A team scopes it, and then the B team or C team delivers it, and you never see the A team again. And that's just it's deceptive, right? I mean, it's like, if you've ever had that done to you, you realize just how degrading it is.
Then it's not a relationship.
It's not a relationship,
right? It's a transaction at that point.
That's exactly right.
It is a bait and switch. It's dangling the carrot. Just win it. And if you truly treat it as a long-term relationship, I think that, like, even that perspective helps.
Yes.
You know, set you up for success. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, so I like to ask folks, like, what is one or two things of tactical advice, you know, specifically related to selling services here that you could give people that would help them just up their game? Like, where do they start? I mean, you had a lot of great stuff that y'all did.
Yeah, I mean, you know, dealing with power obviously is one of those sort of sales strategy things. But if you, in relation to what I love about y'all's product, the detail matters, and to that end, you know, talk about methodology and breaking things down into our 4 Ds. We broke things down, and granted, your product. In spreadsheets and Word documents like everybody else.
Everyone else,
repeatable as much as we could be. But what we did from a philosophy standpoint, I think applies to everybody and to your product is to break things down into small chunks and overload it with detail, right? So if I had a 1,000-hour project, that needs to be broken down into 5, phases.
Mm-hmm.
And in those phases, break those down into stages, and then break those stages down into tasks, and then break those down into subtasks. And it's elaborate, but the details in it matter. And when you're going back to present that first phase,
mm-hmm.
you've got all this detail to rely on. And I think that detail wins projects, and it builds trust, builds credibility.
Yep.
It's like the recipe for the delivery team to follow. And it's that SOW takes all of that granularity of what's in scope and out of scope and defines it at a level that creates nice fences. And good fences make good neighbors, and good fences make good customers, in that if you've got an agreed upon document, if there's a question later on about, is this integration included or not, go back to your scope document. If we missed it, we own it.
Sure. Yeah.
But if you bring it up and it wasn't in there, then we're going to have a polite conversation about a change order.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no big surprise. Avoiding the big surprises is the result of having great detail up front.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, just tweet that or something. It's good stuff. I'm going to tweet happy ears, see more. Good fences make good neighbors. I'll take all that from you, Scott.
You got it.
Awesome.
It. Absolutely.
Well, again, you've done a lot of stuff around the IT channel, but if anyone's interested in kind of reaching out to you, learning more about what you're up to, how can they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is the best.
All on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's the best. That's the easiest.
Got it. So not MySpace anymore or TikTok.
I've still got a great MySpace spot. I got some demo albums on there. I don't think these guys are going to be a hit.
Awesome. I forgot about MySpace until just then. But again, man, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
I think there's a lot that we could dive deeper into, and assuming this gets great response, we'll probably have you on for another one.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, Scott. Thanks. For those of you that are interested, check out scopestack.io/podcast. You can find more of our podcasts out there. Again, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you out there.